Hey all, my name is Peter Kean, and I'm an industrial engineer and the COO of BoltAbout.
And I'm Kaitlin, a mechanical engineering student helping out with this senior project. Today we're going to talk about background, give you a little bit of information about BoltAbout and what's going on. Then we'll talk about our design solutions for our four main objectives, which focused on processes, facilities, inventory tracking, and inventory management. And then we'll give you our recommendations for the future.
BoltAbout is a local startup that leases electric bicycles on a monthly basis. It's about a year old, and it's founded right here in San Luis Obispo. So basically the way it works is for $79 a month, someone can go to our website and lease an electric bicycle with lights, lock, helmet, and maintenance all included. There are four main processes at BoltAbout. The assembly process, the maintenance process, inspections, and actually leasing the bike itself. And there's no standard operating procedures right now for any of these processes. When we first started this project with BoltAbout, many of their processes, such as the assembly process in the picture that you can see, were very sloppy. And one thing about working with a startup is that the processes have improved a lot since we started doing this project, but there are still areas where they can shave time off.
Another development that this startup has seen is expansion into more real estate. In November, the company procured a new warehouse for themselves, not far from their current office space. This is great because previously the bikes were stored wherever they could find space around town, and this new space will serve not only as office space where people can come in and check out a rental, but also as much needed operation space for maintenance, assembly, and storage.
Currently, BoltAbout has paper labels on all of their bikes and batteries so that they can individually identify each one. But as you can see in these pictures, those labels are wearing off over time, and they're becoming completely unreadable and definitely unscannable. Additionally, BoltAbout has stock outages on a fairly regular basis for the rest of its inventory. This is because they don't currently have a system in place that tells them when they need to buy more of a certain item and how much to buy.
This leads us to our overall problem statement for this project, which is that BoltAbout's current operations are not fit to meet their rapidly growing demand. We're excited to help this startup out and think we can make a big impact in the following areas. Our objectives are process improvements and standard operating procedures, design facility layout and storage systems, propose an asset tracking system, and design an inventory management system.
So now we're moving on to the design portion of the presentation. The rental process is the most important process really at BoltAbout. It takes up the most time for employees, and it's the first time where a customer actually meets face-to-face with an employee. It starts when a customer goes online and schedules a time to meet. Then the customer, when the time comes, they'll come in, pick up their bike, sign a contract, make a payment, test ride if they want to, and leave. So we did some time studies on how long each portion of this process takes, and we made a little Pareto chart showing kind of what aspects of the process were taking up the most time. Almost 50% of the time spent on this was conveying information to the customer. So the best way we figured to eliminate the time where customers are asking questions was to have a quick and informative video that they see right after they finish filling out a form on our website. The next two pillars on the Pareto chart are employees entering data and employees entering computer commands. These basically consist of signing contract, making a payment, and adding contract data to the Excel spreadsheet in the warehouse. The best way that we could figure out to solve this problem was to automate as much as possible. So we ended up finding a tool called Zapier that allows us to automate the transfer of data between different software services. For example, when a customer fills out a form on our website, now we can send that information over and put it in a contract that we then email to them for them to sign online. And all this would happen completely before we meet with them in person. Additionally, we'd like to add a barcode reader to quickly identify which bike is going to a customer, and a credit card swiper so that we no longer have to manually input credit card information. For the inspection and maintenance processes, the biggest problem that BoltAbout has is with scheduling their mechanics. Currently, they have trouble keeping enough bikes ready to go at all times. This leads to delayed rentals and sometimes even losing a customer. If they schedule mechanics for too long, though, then salary is wasted on employee idle time. We ran this simulation testing different mechanic work hours to find an optimal schedule. From the simulation results, we graphed the opportunity cost of missing a rental with the cost of employees being idle. And by adding the two together, we can see that currently the optimal work schedule with the minimal cost is for a mechanic to work 4 or 4.5 hours a week. We can also change the input variables to predict mechanic work schedules at any company size.
The facility at BoltAbout is going to be shared with two other companies. Their areas are shown in the top left corner and the bottom right corner. These areas are reserved for those companies and weren't considered for the layout. However, the other space in this image shows the space dedicated to BoltAbout. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the bike rack solution that we have, which we'll talk more about later, the bike stand that's used for maintenance of the bike that can easily be collapsed and stored when maintenance is not needed. Above that is a green trash can that can be wheeled around depending on the operations, such as assembly, which causes a lot of waste. Next to the trash can is a rolling tool chest, which allows BoltAbout to move tools to where they need them. If they do assembly outside in the parking lot, then the tools can go with them, or if it needs to go into the open space in the upper right-hand corner, they can do that as well. Next to that is the workbench, which is the multi-purpose workbench for miscellaneous activities, assembly, inventory checking, you name it. Then that white rectangle in the middle there is an inventory shelf that is storing the parts and accessories that go on the bike. And the last is an L-shaped desk which stores the files, some tabletop equipment, and a computer for checking in customers. This is a view of one configuration option for the open flexible space that was in the upper right-hand corner. The startup culture at BoltAbout is strong, so this space is perfect for not only the inevitable lounge space that comes with long nights and impromptu parties, but it also leaves space for doing a smaller batch of bike assembly indoors or extra storage space for inventory fluctuations. We recommend using chairs like these, which can be folded up and stored in the extra storage space above the bike racks as needed. If you'd like to see a more detailed look at the space, stay tuned at the end of this video for a walkthrough of the SketchUp model used for these stills. Our strategy for comparing layouts was to calculate the distance traveled, which, as you can see in this diagram, is indicated by the frequency of trips between the entry points to the stations. This particular layout is the one we decided to go with because although it was the middle ranked with 218 feet of distance traveled between stations, it scored much higher overall in a multi-criteria decision analysis because it contained the dirty stations to the back corner away from where customers might be walking in from the entrance. It allows access for the other companies to their spaces, and it kept the only stud wall up at the top left free because most of the walls in the space are brick. Next is the bike storage solutions. Here you can see two alternatives we analyzed, however these were extremely expensive. For example, the rack on the left, which is a super fancy two-tiered ultra ergonomic solution, has 10 bikes in 80 square feet but is $11,000. The rack on the right is 10 bikes in 40 square feet, which takes up less square feet because it uses the vertical orientation, but it was $1,500. Here are a few layouts of our ideas for a do-it-yourself rack, which would cost about $450. The top two options are a little bit easier to access bikes and a little bit easier to load. However, they can only store up to 12 bikes. The layout that we decided to go with was the one on the bottom, which staggers the bikes. This layout uses 14 bikes. in a 40 square foot floor space. This model here shows a mock-up of what we expect the rack to look like. It would utilize a 10 foot by 4 foot by 8 foot tall pallet rack with only one of the shelves in place. Instead of a wire rack like you'd see at Home Depot, we would replace it with a reinforced plywood platform into which J-hooks would be mounted to hang the bikes from. The next objective we focused on is inventory tracking. Now it's important to note here, there's two distinct different categories. Inventory tracking we'll use to describe stock keeping unit identifiers, such as a barcode or an RFID that goes onto an item for tracking purposes. Asset tracking will mean a technology that physically tracks or locates an item. For the inventory tracking, there were several options considered for barcodes. The first is the current solution of paper. The second was using an over-laminate on top of the paper label, a polyester label, and an aluminum foil label. Of the options available for barcodes, the one that outperformed all the rest was aluminum. Although its price was far more expensive than the others, it far outperformed any other option on outdoor life rating. It was ranked for almost 10 years. It's extremely scratch resistant, and because of the myassettag.com example that's shown here, there's an extremely beneficial marketing opportunity to have the tag not only be in a visible place to scan well, but also to be seen and show off that it's a BoltAbout bike. RFID and tracking devices like GPS or this Bluetooth tracker, such as Tile shown here, were ruled out for the time being for BoltAbout. Right now, there's not a business case to be made because these are far too expensive for the scale that they're at the moment.
Along with the benefits of easy data entry, the barcodes that Kaitlin talked about have the added benefit of inventory tracking. With barcodes, we always know how many bikes there are in the warehouse and out on the streets. For the rest of the inventory, however, stock outages are still a problem that need fixing. We decided to split the rest of the inventory into two categories. Some of the inventory will be counted weekly and the rest will be simply eyeballed to make sure it's not below a certain level. The weekly supply counts will then be entered into an Excel spreadsheet that uses a modified economic order quantity formula to recommend when to purchase the next batch of a particular item and how much to purchase. The image above is a snapshot of this spreadsheet. In summary, we want to have a welcome to BoltAbout video at the end of the process of scheduling a rental. We also want to have contracts signed online before a customer actually comes and meets with us, and we want those contracts to be integrated with Zapier so that we have minimal manual data entry. We also want to get a credit card scanner so that no longer do employees have to manually enter credit card information. And we want the active use of an inventory management spreadsheet, which we have made for BoltAbout.
Lastly, we would encourage that later on BoltAbout consider the implementation of RFID or asset trackers like Bluetooth or GPS, and definitely expanding their warehouse space. Thanks very much for your time, and we look forward to getting your feedback.